Hi there, my name is Sarah and I am a language learner of my third and fourth languages, French and Mandarin, and a teacher of learning languages. I create language learning resources, which you can find more about on my website. For the full experience of this topic of habits for successful language learning, make sure to check out the blog, which is down below in the description. So, 5 habits for being a successful language learner. The very first habit that I want you to think about developing is to just get started. As simple as it sounds, it can be the most difficult part of starting a new language, of starting a new book, a new course, a new anything, or even just continuing once you get to a difficult point in your language learning journey. And so the just get started, like even if you're bad at it, even if you feel like every time you try to learn, every time you open up your Duolingo app, that you are missing the words, you can't remember the grammar structures, it just feels like it's all bad. Just keep going, just keep doing it. Really the key here is find one simple way that you can keep going or that you can just start. So for me, with my Mandarin practice, which is my newest language, has been using Duolingo, and that has been just a little bit of practice each day, even if it's just a review lesson that day. And my character practice, even if it's just like a single character, writing it a few times that day. And that is enough to just get started. The reason it works to just get started and to do it even when you're bad at it is because we're all bad at it when we start. No one who learns language to fluency is good at it when they start. They start at 0. And the sooner that we accept that, okay, we're going to be bad at it, we're going to make mistakes, it's going to be difficult, the sooner we can jump in and just start making some kind of progress. And not only that, but the better at it we become. And it becomes this cycle of increasingly becoming better at that language, as well as becoming better at learning language and moving toward our goal of fluency within that language. So, habit 1 to develop is to find a way to start learning your language, even if it's something you don't do very well, just something that you can do and that you can start and that you can practice, and to do it. And to make that a habit each day or each week or whatever your goal is, your time allotment for that language, to create that habit of, I'm going to start. Even when I feel discouraged, even when I feel like whatever I'm going to do is going to be wrong or bad or not good enough, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to do it for this amount of time, this day, this week, this however you want to set your schedule. That is habit 1. And habit number 2 is to be okay with being afraid and making mistakes. This is so difficult and so important because as a speaker of another language, you are going to make mistakes. Tons and tons and tons of mistakes. As a speaker of any language, even your native language, you're going to make mistakes. That fear that comes up within speaking is something that we can choose to be absorbed by. We can choose to just be afraid and avoid, or we can choose to be afraid and to do it anyway. And habit 2 is to be afraid and do it anyway, basically, and to be okay with those mistakes. And you might be thinking, well, how do I do this? Like, how do I be okay with being afraid when I'm too afraid to do anything? Well, it's not that you're going to immediately go out and be like, man, I'm speaking, I'm like making all these mistakes and I don't care. It's baby steps. It's like habit 1, like that small way to start anyway. It is finding little ways to ease yourself into being okay with making these mistakes. What that looks like could be finding ways to start speaking and practicing making the mistakes and doing it in a safe way for you. So if speaking to someone in conversation is completely out of the question because your language level is too low, or you're just too afraid, or it's too much, then you start even smaller. You start by just speaking to yourself when no one else is around. You just have a sentence in your language and you read it out loud, and that's your speaking. And maybe you get a little bit more comfortable and you start just kind of making up sentences and speaking a little bit on your own. Maybe you decide to record yourself in a voice note and listen to yourself and say, oh, okay, and I sound really bad. And maybe that's really uncomfortable. And you do that for a little bit and then it's not so uncomfortable. And then you think, maybe I can speak to somebody else. And then you maybe find a friend, a conversation partner, or a tutor, and you speak with that person a little bit in that safe, controlled environment of speaking where you're getting correction. And you do that for a little bit, and then it's like, oh, that's okay. And then you think, okay, maybe I'm ready to go out and have a conversation in this language. And you do that, and you think, oh man, that was really tough, and I made some embarrassing mistakes, and maybe I don't want to do it again. And you take a little break, and then maybe you do it again because you're crazy like me. But the point here is that you do these little ways of practicing, of making mistakes and getting comfortable with those mistakes, starting with just the smallest one possible, like practicing all by yourself, writing it out and then reading it, and working all the way up to having a conversation with someone. And in this process, which this could be over a couple weeks, couple months, this could be over a couple of years, how long that takes depends on you, on your motivation, your goals, your desires, your just you, you're you. It depends on you. And over the course of that, this crazy thing called fluency also happens as you're practicing and you're making mistakes, and then you're going back and then challenging yourself a little bit more to overcome that fear a little bit more, to make some more mistakes just a little bit more. And before you know it, people ask you, oh, how did you do this? How did you learn how to speak like this? And that, my friends, is habit 2. To develop the ability to speak fearlessly and confidently with mistakes, and honestly just being okay with that fear that exists when you're speaking and when you're making mistakes, and to slowly and steadily work your way through it and use that as a tool for learning and improving. Habit 3 is about creating this slow and steady language learning lifestyle. The reason this is so important to not just go like, boom, right through it, is that when we take the time to slowly build and create consistency, we're developing this habit for language learning. And the reason we need a habit rather than just, oh, I'm gonna learn this language today, is because it takes a long time. And even more than that, once you learn the language to fluency, say being able to speak and listen, maybe read and write in a way that you can understand and be understood easily, in order to do this, it takes years. It takes years to get to that level of being able to communicate in speech or writing fluently in a language. Even once you get to that level, you still have to practice that language much less intensively just to maintain a language, but you still have to practice, and it becomes a part of who you are. So making that habit, that shift, is like you're altering your identity. You can't just the ultimate identity, right? Just like that, you have to slowly ease into it, into this new skill that you're training yourself to do if you want it to last and if you want it to be something that you're very proficient at. We need slow and steady, consistent progress within our language learning journey. This is our habit 3. We need this slow and consistent progress. This really just builds on to those other habits that I've mentioned already. Maybe we start with Duolingo, we start with some writing practice, maybe character practice if it's a language that is like that, maybe some simple writing, reading, and then we build onto that. This habit of slow and consistent progress is also important because the change is so much when we are learning a language. Like, we start at the beginning level with so much of practice and memorization and really just a lot of memorization, regurgitation at the beginning level. And then as we progress, we have to adjust even more. So we have to go from just memorization of basic vocabulary, alphabet, grammar structures to using those in simple sentences, complex sentences, writing, speaking, being in different environments. This is also really helpful to do gradually, because if we are slowly and steadily building our habit, then it's that much easier to see, okay, I'm gonna adjust a little bit today, because we also build the habit of being in constant adjustment. What that means is that I am right now learning Mandarin, using Duolingo, using some character practice, and as I do that, I see, this is working, this is good. I practice speaking, listening, Duolingo, practice a little bit of writing, character practice books, and then I get to the point where I think, I feel like this is okay. I'm kind of checking out mentally as I'm writing my characters. I need to level up a little bit. So maybe instead of just copying the one character, I'm going to write some character combinations to form some different words or sentences with that character. It's like little things. The idea here too is to get into more of the creative flow within learning our language. And if we are slowly becoming one with this language, then that allows us more time for creative expression within that language. Let's stop there with this habit for slow and steady, consistent progress before we jump into the next habit. Here we are with habit 4. Don't study too much. Okay, you need to take breaks. What a break can look like is a quick, I'm gonna get up and take a break. I'm gonna stretch and take a walk and a little shake it off. Or a break could be, I am just not going to study languages right now. We have things that come up within our lives, our schedules, however it is, and sometimes it's just not feasible that day, that week, that month, that year. That can be a break too. Now, if you're really serious about learning your language and you're going through, consistency in studying every day or every week is really the most optimal way to work toward that fluency. But it is important to be able to discern when maybe it's not a priority at the time to take those longer breaks. Also, when you need a break, when you are studying, especially if you're studying for any longer than an hour, you need to take a break. Your brain will just check out after an hour. You need at least a stretch break, a walk break, a bathroom break, something. This is habit 4, is about taking breaks, yes, but it's also about knowing when you need that break. This is important to develop and difficult to develop in order to discern, when do I need a break and when am I just being lazy and not wanting to do what I need to do. This is for you to discover about yourself. How to do it is to start reflecting on how you feel in your practice and make some mistakes doing it, of course. Ultimately, to have some kind of a structure that you follow within your practice, within your schedule of when you're going to study, and then also have some amount of freedom for yourself that allows you to flow through that and take breaks when you need them. As you get more into your process, you'll naturally be able to gauge when you need those breaks. If you're like, man, I don't know, just tell me, when do I need to take a break? Here's something that you can apply right now, which is don't study for longer than an hour without a break. If you're like, man, an hour is kind of a lot too, 20 minutes. Do 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break, do another 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break, do your hour that way. That's something really implementable. If you're brand new to learning a language, even learning just a little bit each day is really helpful. And one of the reasons that slow and steady progress is so valuable for habit building is that if you do something really simple, like what I'm doing with my Mandarin right now, lingo and the character practice, I do Duolingo every day for my Mandarin, and it's like 40 something days now. So somewhat of a new habit, but I've done it with other languages too, and it's effective. That is nice because it's a very small amount of time. It can take 5 minutes, or it can take however long. Sometimes I'll do 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but it can be just 5 minutes that day. And that's cool because it's a very, very digestible amount of time, easy to add into schedule, and then building habits on top of that. Now, a new character practice on top of that. Character practice is something that I do like whenever I feel like it. It's cool to have the must do, may do kind of setup there, because then I can practice, have that structure that keeps me on track, and then also have the layers that add more depth to my practice and not become overwhelmed, and slowly build my language habits and my language fluency. That is a second way that you can build a habit slowly with something that you can do to take breaks. There you go. You can do something really simple like 5 minutes a day or more if you have that energy to do more, and then just slowly add on to it. That way you don't just slam yourself with an hour or 2 hours and then feel overwhelmed and want to quit, because that ultimately slows you down and takes up more time. Whereas you can go the slow and steady progress route and make more progress in ultimately less time when we look at it over the months and years. Our fifth and final habit is to do other things besides language learning. This is so important because we are more than language learners, and everyone has a life outside of language learning. And when we learn a language, we're not only learning that language, grammar, vocabulary, we are learning about the culture, we're learning about the people, we're learning about life through the lens of that language. If you want to go like really deep into that process, which we're not going to do right here, right now, but do other things. This is also where that slow progress is really cool, because it allows you to play with the language, to do just a little bit and then do other things. Go outside, go exercise, take a walk in nature, be with friends, go to the movies, go do fun things, do other things, and allow those other things to inspire your creativity for language learning. How they do that, that is up to you, and that is something that you can open yourself up to. If you would like some ideas for how to do this, because you're like, man, I came here because I want habits and I want to know how to do this, here's a couple things you can try. When we're learning language, we're learning culture. I think we can agree on that. Outside of language learning, we can watch a movie. That's a pretty accessible thing to do. And this can be a movie in say English, because if you're watching this video, you speak English, and allow that to come back into your language learning. So maybe you watch a movie that has something to do with the language you're learning. Maybe you're learning French, you watch a French movie. I hesitate to say you watch a movie in that language because the idea is kind of to get away from the language, but you can do it this way. You can expand into other things this way. One way that I am inspired, for example, by things other than language learning is by watching movies and thinking like, this is cool, I like how this is filmed, I like these different shots, and like inspiration for like my content here. And for language learning things, I see my gardening as a connection back to my language learning, which is that within the like Chinese and Japanese culture, there's a big focus on nature and on gardens and on wellness, and Chinese on energy flow, all of these things. So I do these other practices like gardening that connects back to language learning for me. It refreshes my brain. Going outside, being in nature connects me to something different. Sometimes it's like that, there's a connection there between the language and what you're doing. Sometimes it's just to disconnect from the language and then to come back and have creativity or have ideas just because you've taken a break from that. It can go either way. So something that you can walk away with and do with this, doing other things, is to, one, do something completely different that is just beneficial to you as a person, because that will help you with language learning. When you're trying to do something that is difficult, that is new for you, being better as a person, being healthier, going out for a walk, exercise, eating good food, doing something fun like a movie or a game or something. That's option one, completely unrelated to language learning, coming back in with a fresh perspective. Option two is to do something that you do see some connection to language learning with, like for example my gardening or movies, to watch something that maybe is in your English or your native language that has something to do with the culture or history of the language you're learning, somehow connected, or to watch a movie in that language using subtitles, dubbed, however you want to do that. And I'll leave you guys with that. Those are two options to do something else completely different, or something else that has a little bit of something to do with your language. And of course, make sure to check out that blog post down below, and I will see you guys back here next time. Bye!